I'm just going, you're right. You are driving the bus. I'm along for the ride. I hope it's interesting.
Hey there, this is Nikki Sands, founder and CEO of Gigs, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music with the guy who seems to know a thing or two himself, Bob Bender.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today, Scott Welch, who is a highly accomplished individual with a diverse range of experiences in the music industry. Hey, listen, this is the bio that they give me.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Among his notable achievements, Scott is an integral part of the team responsible for building the highly anticipated Game of Thrones attraction in Las Vegas, Nevada, in partnership with HBO and Caesars Entertainment, scheduled to open in 2024. This attraction promises an immersive experience for fans of the renowned television series. I'm going to have to watch the TV series just so I know what to expect.
That's pretty good BS there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Scott has managed the careers and development of numerous multi-platinum recording artists, including Alanis Morissette, a mutual friend of ours, Leanne Rimes.
Yes.
Steve Perry, Paula Abdul, Collective Soul, and C&C Music Factory, just to name a few. Scott's expertise extends to his previous role as a partner of Mosaic Media Group, where he worked with artists and celebrities across music, film, and television. You're just a busy guy.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
I just paid somebody really good money to write the bio.
Yeah,
that's all.
They've done a good job.
Yeah.
Notable clients include Green Day, the Goo Goo Dolls, Seal, Jim Carrey, Ellen DeGeneres, and Vince Vaughn, among many others. At Mosaic, Scott also had the opportunity to oversee Dick Clark Productions and manage the music publishing catalogs of such esteemed artists as ZZ Top and Aerosmith. Scott's forward-thinking approach also led him to invest and advise the development of StubHub. Now, that I did not know about you.
Yeah.
The first online secondary ticketing company. He currently serves as the president of Scott Welch Management, Inc., where he oversees the careers of various talented artists and provides consulting services to multiple Nashville-based music technology companies. His involvement in the entertainment industry also expands beyond music as he serves on the board of directors of Wherever TV, a public traded television company. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Let's get on past that.
Wow. I know that we just ate up half the show.
Yeah. We can go home now.
I know that at one point you and I were passing emails back and forth, and what are we going to talk about? And you said, let's talk about anything but quantum physics.
There we go.
And I got to tell you, that was actually on the top of my list.
It was either that or trigonometry.
That's where I get lost.
Yeah.
How did you get started in the music business?
It sounds kind of weird, but my dad was military. We lived on the West Coast, and he was flying back and forth to Japan. And I had like the first kind of stereo system, separate Pioneer, and a friend of ours was a little older, and we would go to concerts in San Francisco, smoke pot and get into trouble, and I realized I kind of want to do that. So I was student body president in high school, and I had to chair the entertainment company. So I started booking bands, and I learned to be a sound guy. I did that for a while. I went to college. I thought, well, I'll do entertainment law. I hated it. And I started working in a studio, and then I got a job as driving the T-shirt truck for a band. And that went from production to a production manager, then a tour manager, and then into management.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, in other words, it was the University of Hard Knocks.
yeah.
You learned it from the road.
Yep. Sleeping in the truck.
Yep.
Don't have money for hotels.
Yep.
You know.
Used to do that myself.
Yes, we
I
did.
get it. You got into, you're so diverse when we read this bio. And honestly, this bio's just really kind of a thumbprint of what everything you've accomplished. I just tried to kind of pull out the sweet spots of it. But management, and we're going to talk about several different things, I'm sure, today in this conversation. Management is not an easy road to hoe. And you're dealing with the emotions and the peculiarness of, if that's a word, of the different artists, the celebrity mindset that goes on. How did you get started in that end of the business?
I realized that I really enjoyed being part of the creative process. There's nothing more for me fulfilling is when an artist calls me and goes, hey, can you come by rehearsal? We just wrote a new song. Or come to the studio. You know, I get to hear songs before the public gets to hear them. And so when you hear something, you go, wow, and then it becomes a worldwide smash. That's an addiction to that.
Yeah.
And I think that was the main thing for me.
Getting started in management, how did that come about?
Through being a tour manager, I'd met a bunch of business managers, and one of them, I said to him, look, if there's ever an opportunity to come off the road, I'd like to work at a management company. And there was an artist that these two guys had signed, and they were, in those days, radio promotion business, which was payola.
Yeah.
And they had no road experience, touring experience, and it was Paula Abdul. So I went to work for them and kind of did the day-to-day on Paula. And that's kind of my first management client.
Was that somewhat of, I use this expression when I explain myself, because when I started road managing, it was literally baptism by fire. Is that how it was for you?
Yeah, you're constantly trying to hit the curveball. You know, I always looked at it, there are no problems, there are only solutions. And I tried to approach it and tried not to let myself, oh God, the world's coming to an end. I just got to figure out how to stop this from crashing and burning.
Rotating the other direction. Yeah, and I think a lot of times with artists, you deal with that certain peculiar aspect that we don't see in normal people, or at least it doesn't rise to the surface. That in itself, I don't think there's a formal music education, business music education that trains you to do that.
No, you either have to know how to deal with it or you're going to fail. You've got to figure out how to deal with that ego, which you need that ego. I don't want to have an artist that doesn't have an ego.
Right.
You just can't let it be destructive. And you have to stop them from destroying themselves.
Which I had this conversation with some people that deal in marketing and branding, and a lot of these creative souls out there, they have that certain tormented side.
They're tortured.
Yeah. And they have a tendency, and I've worked with some artists that just, I'm going to self-destruct, and this is a great day to do it. How do you deal with that?
I think the biggest challenge for a lot of artists is they have a lot of these trauma issues, and they go, oh, when I become rich and famous, that's all going to go away. Well, what happens is they become rich and famous, they don't go away, and they are magnified. And so you just have to find a way. You have to build a trust with them that they know you're not going to make the best decision for yourself. You're not going to make the best decision for the record company or the promoter. You're going to make the best decision for the artist.
Let's talk about the record company for a minute, because I think and this isn't beat up on record label day.
No.
Trust me, it's not. We do that plenty other occasions on this show. The record label does or does not have the best interest of the artist.
It can depend. It depends. Why the record, it's really changed. A manager's job in the old days was to manage this record label that had publishing, marketing, radio, and now managers, a lot of that stuff's in-house.
Yeah.
Record companies today are more of a bank and a marketing company. They're not as much of a creative company as they used to be. And it depends. Some labels, and we won't get into bashing them, but some labels were much more driven by creativity than the bottom line. And the business really changed when record labels got bought by corporations and there was a stock price. And that's when things changed, I think, the most.
I noticed that when I first got into the record business in the 90s.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking, I want to get off the road and have a steady paycheck and sit in an office. And I went to work for a record label that made me manager of artist development. And the first thing I was doing was back out on the road every night. I had the steady paycheck, but I didn't have the desk. And that's one of the things I wanted to say is I think that role of management of artist development, the labels, they've gotten rid of that.
Yes.
And now they're looking for numbers. They're looking for the followers and likes and.
You have to come prepared. You have to come. They're not walking into a bar and seeing a guy going, "Oh, that guy's a star. We'll make him a star." Doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, and it's more now of the analytics. What can you bring to the table for the label? So, with that being said, does it make good sense for an artist who has that high volume of followers, listeners, streamers to even consider a record deal at this point?
I think you really have to look at all aspects because one of the challenges is money. Where's the money come from? Bands, guys are working jobs, and there's this trade-off where we need you to quit your job, but you don't have enough money to live on, and that's when the record label comes in play.
Yeah. It's not an easy assessment, though, because you have to determine whether or not you're going to give up your rights.
I just signed a band, and the main reason we signed to the label was I was really impressed with the team, and the A&R guy that signed the band has a history of breaking back bands and making great records, and that was the main reason I signed.
And that is really the crux of the issue, so to speak, is having that hit that the label can expand upon. Now, with that being said,
it's even hard to define what a hit is today.
Exactly. And I was going to say, does radio play that important role like it used to? They used to be kind of the gatekeepers or at least the keymasters.
No, radio now is looking at streams. They're looking at the same thing labels are. They look at streams, analytics, all that stuff.
So are they choosing the songs to play on radio not based on what the record labels are providing?
Well, the record labels are providing it, but they're not necessarily playing it. The smart record labels say are not even going to radio until they have the story. So we've created the momentum. So that radio, that's just the gasoline that you put on the fire.
Right.
It isn't the other way around where you use radio to start the fire, we've got a single. We'll see if we can get it on in Green Bay, Wisconsin and Madison. And if it starts to get some energy and you start to sell a few units in the local record store, then we can expand how we market the record. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking that at least terrestrial radio. And honestly, I'm one of those guys that I don't listen to radio in the traditional sense anymore.
Nobody does, hardly.
I'm either listening to Sirius XM or I'm listening to Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Apple Music. And I wouldn't even know what traditional radio station to listen to in this town or anywhere anymore.
Right.
Is that really becoming the new norm? And if it is, should radio be getting nervous?
Radio is in trouble, I think.
Yeah.
I think the thing that the biggest challenge we have as an industry is technology has made it so anybody can make a record. And there's way too much crap. At least the old system, there was a gatekeep. Look, we're not putting you in the studio. It's $200,000 to make a record. We're not, we don't believe in you enough to make a record. And so that's the challenge today is how do you cut through the noise?
Yeah, I found a quote this morning, in fact, that I'm pulling up here that was written by Tony Visconti, who was the producer for David Bowie and several others. And he says people are still making organic music, and I'm involved in a couple of groups that are doing that. But labels are frightened of that, and the labels never had courage. Never, ever in a million years did labels have the courage to break new ground. It happened in spite of them.
I would say that's 90% true. But if you look at the early days of Warner Brothers when Mo Austin and those guys were running that label, and you think about all the bands, Neil Young, Tom Petty, Van Halen, and Alanis was there, and I felt they totally understood the creative process.
I think a lot of those people, like say Amat Ergetson, they were pioneers in the record business. Are we not seeing that anymore?
No, because the people that are in charge of record companies are beholden to shareholders. They've got it. They got to answer the bottom line.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
No, because the old, our company managed Goo Goo Dolls. They made 3 records and just got their ass kicked till they finally had a hit. Nobody would do that today. You wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, you wouldn't invest that time and money to develop an act.
No. The good news for the industry is the label during COVID and since have gotten burned really bad by signing all these TikTok artists where nobody gives a rat's ass. They can't sell tickets. Nobody cares, right? They have all these followers, but it doesn't equate to anything.
In fact, I want to talk about that when we come back from our break. In the meantime, we're going to get in a word or two for our sponsors. In the studio with us today, Scott Welch.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message. Thanks.
Since 1963, Korg has been creating new experiences in music and performance. That is what drove the creation of some of Korg's most legendary products, such as the Poly 6, the M1, the Electribe, the Triton, the Minilog, the Kronos, Wave State, Op6, and most recently the Nautilus, which is what we have here in our studio. Korg is dedicated to creating new, innovative, and uncompromising instruments which maintain the highest quality to inspire music makers, past, present, and future. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products and start creating new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, on the business side of music, Scott Welch is sitting across the podcast table. I think you and I have we have at least as much of an interesting conversation during the break as we do on the show.
Yeah.
So I actually want to back up a little bit because I like some of the stories that you shared. You said it was your second gig road managing.
Yes.
Was Dokken.
Right.
How did that come about? Because the label was involved in that, right?
So the first kind of where I was the tour manager by myself was a band called Faster Pussycat, which was a strip band out of the late 80s.
Yeah, like Gazzari's and Whiskey, Go-Go, and all those great venues.
Tammy Down was the singer, and they had built this thing called Ricky's Cat House, and it's a whole strip, L.A. strip band, L.A. Guns, all those Motley Crue, all those bands out of that time frame. And they were on Elektra, and the first record came out, and I managed that, and then when that was over, Elektra people recommended me for Dokken, which was another Electra band. And I had never met the manager, and I probably don't need to say his name because he's famous. But I love him, but I'm just not going to say his name. He calls me on the phone. Is this Scott? I go, yes, sir. And he goes, we only have 2 rules here. Always get the money and don't call us unless somebody dies. I go, yes, sir, I got it. And that was the days when Don and the guitar player, they'd fist fight in the dress room before the
show.
Before the show.
Oh,
We're playing
my
Giant
God.
Stadium with Van Halen and Scorpions and Don, and I come back there and they're fighting. I go, guys, we're fixing to go on and like there's 50,000 people here. Can you stop?
At least long enough to do the show.
So I can get the money at least.
Yeah. I remember back in, I think it was the late 80s, probably 87, 88. I was out with another act at that time, and I was looking to make a change because this act was literally just wearing me out.
Yeah.
And so, once again, it was a record label. Record labels were really good at finding gigs for road managers.
Yeah, because they wanted someone who was, they looked at it. You actually worked for both the band and the record label. The record label, you're protecting their investment.
Yeah, exactly. So the label had the manager of LA Guns call me. And I remember I was sitting in a hotel in Chicago, and I get this phone call, and he goes, is this Bob? And I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, I'm the manager for LA Guns. You know about the band? I said, no. And he says, that really doesn't matter. I have 2 questions for you. I said, sure. And he goes, do you have long hair? I said, nope, short. He goes, do you have tattoos? I said, nope. He goes, okay, we'll get back with you. It's the last I ever heard from him. Yeah, I guess I didn't fit the criteria for the band. But it's a business. When we're out there road managing or tour managing or production managing, we're really dealing with other people's money.
It's a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah, and their careers.
Yeah.
And like you said, the fight breaks out. You got to break up the fight long enough to get them on stage to perform and hope they're not too bloody in the process.
Yeah.
That's not always easy.
No, I used to have keys. The rule was I have a key to everybody's room. Right? Because we'd go down for bus call and someone wouldn't show up and I'd have to go up there and go, God, I hope he's alive. And I'd open the door. He'd still be out cold. There'd be bottles and weed everywhere and girls. I'd go, everybody out. I'd clean the room so there's get his ass in the shower, get on the bus. I mean, that was what it was.
Yeah. And that was really the heyday of rock and roll back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't see that much anymore now.
No, because of the cell phones.
Yeah.
Like the stuff they got away with in those days, they couldn't get away with.
No, it'd all be on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and everything else.
I was tour managing with an artist who would give all the crew backstage passes, and you put your initials on the pass, and you go out and give them to the best looking girls.
Oh, geez.
Girls would come backstage after the show, and if the artist picked your girl, you got $100 spiff.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, that stuff doesn't fly now, thank God.
No, thank goodness.
Yes.
Oh, my gosh. Could you imagine?
It was awful.
In this society today?
Yeah.
No, you'd be persecuted. Let's talk about touring because the touring world has changed dramatically. One of the things now is I read so many acts that just can't even afford to go on the road anymore. The busing and the trucking and the expense of crews and et cetera, et cetera. Is that something that, and I guess it all came out of the pandemic, Part
of it, yeah.
We stopped touring because of the pandemic. And then all of a sudden, everybody and their brother and their twin cousin got back out on the road.
Right.
Are we going to see that settle down anytime soon?
I know. I think the biggest change is and I don't mean this disrespectfully, is the work ethic. When I was managing Steve Perry, Journey, they'd make a record. They tour for 9 months straight. They come home. They take a little break. They write music. They record it, and they go right back out. They tour for a lot, and that's why some of those bands they'd go play Omaha. They'd play Tulsa. They'd play they wouldn't play just the big market.
Yeah, they play the secondary and the tertiary cities, yeah.
Yeah, and that's how, and they built a following, and that's why they're still viable today.
But we're not seeing that anymore, are
No.
we? Yeah.
People don't want to work that hard. And I will tell you, it's a grind. Anyone who's been on the road, people go, oh, it's such a great lifestyle. Let me tell you, fucking being on a bus with the same people you saw all day.
Yeah.
and trying to get, I know as a tour manager, I never felt rested.
No, because you're the last one to go to bed, and you're the first one to get up. And if you're lucky, you're in a tour bus. Otherwise, you're in a 12-passenger van pulling a trailer.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a romantic life that is.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Eating bad food.
Yeah. Backstage catering, deli trays.
I will say a lot of the touring has gotten more humanized. I mean, if you're on a real tour, the food is really good. A lot of tours carry masseuse now, and I think that's all really healthy.
I know that Rod Stewart, when I worked with him back in the 90s, he actually carried his own personal chef for the tour catering. And that makes so much sense because how many times do we get food poisoning out there just eating something that's been sitting out either under a heat lamp or the sun? And it's pretty miserable because you can't stop the show.
No.
Unless you're the star.
Yeah.
But if you're the road manager or one of the crew guys.
Just work through it.
Yeah, you got to. But when we get back to touring, we lost quite a few venues due to the pandemic that weren't able to reopen. And those that were are really trying to recoup that lost time and that lost revenue. Ticket prices, that's one of the biggest things that we see these days. I think Taylor Swift, God bless her, she's the poster child for how much money you can get for a ticket.
I think what's hurt the business is the low end. Because if you have, I have a band that's playing 5 to 750 clubs.
Right.
And for someone, and we keep our tickets at $15, $18, but you can buy a couple tickets. Drinks are expensive. You Uber there. You can buy a t-shirt at $100 and something just to go to Basement East here to see a show.
Yeah.
And so it's really difficult for bands on that side to make money.
The medium-tiered acts, the ones that are playing, 1,500 to 3,000 seat venues, is it just as tough?
Yeah, it's tough in that market.
Why is that?
Because it's again, you can't charge the ticket price isn't reflective of the cost
of the overhead.
And you're not in a situation where you can really do VIP yet. So you're kind of stuck in that 25 to 35 thing. I think my biggest frustration with ticket sales is secondary market. And I was part of that, I'll admit, because StubHub was, but the lift needs to be going to the artists. And we could get around that, but nobody wants to do it because everybody's making money, is if you buy a ticket, you don't get in unless you show your ID. It's your ticket.
Right. It's on your phone.
That's right. You can't give it to somebody else. You can't upsell it to somebody else. Because I'm always trying to figure out when I put tickets on sale, what will the market bear that is fair? And then some markets, I underprice the tickets and I see them, I put them up for 25 and I see they're selling for 75.
But are they getting that?
Well, sometimes they are.
Yeah.
It depends how hot the ticket is.
Right. I noticed that, I think it was Live Nation recently announced that they're taking away the merchandise commission fee that they were going to charge bands.
Yeah, because most bands, that's part of how they survive.
Yeah. That, I think, is a smart move it's a good move for the bands.
It's a good move for let me tell you, let's face it, all Live Nation is a driver for Ticketmaster, right? That's their main thing, because the money is in the tickets. It's not in the venues and all that shit. That's in the ticketing fees. So they need to be responsible to develop more headliners. And if you squeeze everybody at the bottom end, you can't develop a headliner because they can't afford it.
Do you see a short-sightedness maybe of major acts like Taylor and Beyonce? I know we're starting to lose some of the older generation. Springsteen's not healthy right now. I think where I saw Pink, is dealing with some health issues and had to postpone some dates. Are we not seeing, do we have a vacuum of major headliners these days?
I think so, but then I see bands, I go, they're selling out Bridgestone? I think the challenge is going to be, as the economy tightens, you're only going to spend on things you really want to see. So something you might go, I really like that band, but I can't afford it.
Yeah. I know some friends of ours from Colorado flew out to Los Angeles to see Elton John at Dodger Stadium, and they invited my wife and I. Said, come on, all you got to do is pay for your tickets, And the cheap seats, nosebleed sections, a quarter mile from the stage, $300 a piece.
I know.
And we just can't do that. That's just ridiculous. Is that going to change anytime soon, or do you think
as long as people keep paying it, it's not going to change. It's like anything else.
There, yeah. It's like the Taylor Swift tickets. There's some that we're going.
And also, too, when you look at those older artists, they're appealing to an audience that has money. It's the young acts that are suffering because they're appealing to 20 to 30-year-olds who are struggling.
Yeah.
Between rent and the cost of living and all that stuff, that's where we see the biggest crunch.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for another one of our sponsors, and when we come back, we'll have some more conversation with Scott Welch.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives, whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
It may have been Tammy Wynette who sang Stand By Your Man, but it was actually Nancy Jones who stood by the legendary George Jones for more than 30 years and helped bring him to the light. Now in her new book, Playin' Possum, readers get an intimate look at the country music legend through the eyes of his wife and partner. Nancy knew George Jones better than anyone. The good and the bad, the horrendous and the hilarious. Married in 1983, George quit his wild and wicked ways for a while, but Nancy learned all too soon that there were demons holding a strong grip on the man she loved. People who knew the possum credit Nancy's tenacious love, faith, and encouragement for saving George's life and rebuilding his career. For the first time in Playin' Possum, Nancy Jones reveals the true insider perspective and little-known stories about the country music legend, his battles with cocaine, alcohol, abusive behavior, battles with himself, and against the demons that sought to control and destroy him. Read the compelling first-hand account from the woman who refused to give up on George Jones. Playin' Possum is available now. Order your copy today from nancyjonesbooks.com, Amazon, and more.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Scott Welch is sitting across the podcast table. We talk about everything that's going on in the music business. One of the things that we have not necessarily discussed is music and television. You're so diversified that you're doing quite a bit of both. I remember back in the days of the After Midnights and the Don Kirshner rock concerts, it's a different television world now because now we have 500 channels instead of 3. Is television still a viable commodity for the artists, especially an up-and-coming artist?
Yeah, I think so. I'm a big believer in today's world about direct-to-consumer. So one of the companies I work with is a company called Single, and they are an app you put in your e-commerce store that allow you to do anything digitally out of your store. So we just did a live broadcast of Travis Scott from Rome. He did it directly out of his Shopify store. So he controlled the data, he controlled the money. I think the biggest challenge I see is that artists, everybody says, oh, build up your Facebook following, build up your Instagram following. You don't own that following. Instagram owns it.
That's
Facebook. Right. If you have 100,000 followers on Facebook and you want to get them to do something, you have to pay Facebook to get that to happen. So our whole thing is, I'm telling artists, use those things as bait. YouTube, use them as bait. But once you're communicating with that fan, drive them to your e-commerce store where you own the relationship.
Get that email, because Facebook or any of those other support sites, they could go away tomorrow.
And they can shut you off. I've heard bands got bounced, so I'm a big believer in direct-to-consumer, because I figure if there are bands I love, and if I'm communicating directly with the relationship is much stronger.
And I think the artist or the act controlling that engine, in the long run, is the smartest move of all.
Yeah, because not only is the relationship worth money, but the data is worth money.
Yeah, exactly. And so with television these days, we talk about video on demand, VOD. We talk about, the YouTube channels. We talk about the traditional, quote unquote, television networks. Does it make sense for that artist? And when I say artist, I'm going to preface that by saying the independent artist. Because if they've got a label, they've got a big machine, hopefully, behind them. The independent artist, does it make sense for them to maybe create their own series, whether it be limited or be ongoing?
Yeah, I have this band we launched today. They do every Friday, they do a 35-second or 40-second piece on an album they love. And
Not necessarily theirs.
No, it's not theirs.
Yeah.
I think they launched the series with, oh God, what was the name of that? I can't think of it, but that's something they were inspired by. And so we try to do some of those things. It's a balance, because if you give away everything about yourself, the audience is like, okay, I know everything, next. You've got to keep some mystery.
And I was going to say, there gets to a point where you're giving too much out.
Yeah, I really don't give a shit what my favorite band had for dinner. I really don't care.
Right.
But I am interested to see a songwriting process. I am interested to be in the studio when they're making the record. That does interest me.
Is that those moments of intimacy? And that's really what I would say, because you're now pulling back the curtain.
Yeah.
And seeing the person that's behind the curtain. Is that something that maybe is underutilized?
Yeah, I think people are afraid of it. Because
when you say people, you're talking about the artists?
Yeah, because you got to be willing. The artists that are most successful, you think about, are the ones who are vulnerable, and they let you see who they are, and you understand why they wrote that song. What was the purpose of that song? And I think that's what's bad about country music right now. I don't want to hear any more about your dog and your truck and you going to the lake and the whiskey you're drinking. And that's why the women in country are so much more, to me, exciting than the men, because they're willing to be vulnerable and talk about their lives and talk about all the humanness that we all have. That's what brings you into an artist, to me, is, can I see who you are?
I hear a lot about the bro country, which I think you just really described. What's next for the country music business then? Because they can't seem, at least from the male vocalist perspective, they can't seem to get away from that.
I don't know. I think something's going to have to break through. I mean, Chris Stapleton kind of broke through that, right? But it takes courage for artists and labels to sign those kind of guys.
And the labels have to really be willing to do that. Or at least be a Chris Stapleton, that you set your own stone in the ground.
I mean, I look at it like, in the late 80s, we've got all these hair metal bands, and overnight Nirvana hits, and it's over.
Yeah, it's
like
grunge.
Grunge crushed it. So what's going to happen in country? I don't know. I mean, some of the stuff that is happening in country is there's a hip-hop coming into country more and more, but the women are writing great stuff. They're writing about relationships, and I don't pay a ton of attention, but I can't keep track of all of them. They all wear jeans and t-shirts and baseball hats or cowboy hats. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely a business, a segment of the business that needs to diversify, at least more than what it has been.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what Scott's got coming up next. You, like I said, you've got your hands in mini pies. What are you working on these days?
The thing I think I'm most interested is work. I really have enjoyed working with young entrepreneurs. It's like managing artists, it's the same skill set.
So it's going beyond the artist and finding, like our friend Sarah Fleshner, those young entrepreneurs in her 20s.
Yeah, I have 4 or 5 companies now that I mentor, help them raise money, bring relationships, get the company up on its feet.
Are they all music entertainment driven?
Most of them are music, and I have one sports called A to Z Sports, which is this new, it's all digital platform, and they're doing really well. I'm pretty excited about that.
That really is the future of our business, which is it's all digital now. We're not really, I mean, I'm an analog guy in a digital world. Sometimes it's hard for me to wrap my head around all the new technology and try and figure it out.
I mean, I think the thing that's scary mostly about the music business is AI.
So let's talk about that for a minute. AI has popped its head and everybody seems to be running to the hills. Is there a reason to be running to the hills?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, there is. Because AI is making music while you're sleeping, and it's going to flood the streaming services. And the problem with AI, it teaches itself. Right now, AI music isn't very good, but think about if you heard AI music a year ago and where it is now and where it's going to be, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
And you're not going to know, is that really Bruce Springsteen or not?
That in itself is a scary part. Is there anything we should be on the lookout for? Is there anything the industry can do to alleviate or at least slow this process down, or is it just one big giant monster?
I don't know. I think the labels are going to have to figure out something because their copyrights are what give them value. And if the copyrights don't have value anymore, then they're all going to be in trouble.
Scott, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
You are a wealth of information, even if we did not talk about quantum physics.
Yeah, exactly.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.
Play something we can dance to.